Hey everybody, welcome to the Ground Effect podcast, where we dive into the heart of Formula One, bringing you the latest news, insider analysis, and sharing our thoughts on the motorsport we love. So come and join us, G and Mick, as we look forward to what promises to be an exciting 2025 Formula One season. And there we have it, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix wrapped up for 2025, bringing the triple header to a close, won in impressive circumstances by Oscar Piastri, P2, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, and rounding out the podium, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Alongside me, Mick, what did you think of the race? Were you pretty impressed?
Yeah, I have to say, the aerial shots of the circuit, pretty impressive. The colours, the way it snakes along the corniche there. It was an okay race. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was as good as Bahrain, but it was definitely good. Plenty to talk about. Like you mentioned, Oscar in P1. He's a real threat for the championship this year. Again, Lando, another mistake on Saturday. Another strong showing from Max. I think we kind of thought that was going to be the case anyway, because that circuit more suited towards the Red Bull. For me, driver of the day, Charlie Leclerc. Did a solid job.
Yeah, Charlie Leclerc. Yeah, he did do a solid job. He was a little quiet in a way, but he rounded out that P3 and got some good points in the bag, and the first podium of the year for Ferrari, if you discount the sprint result for Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, I think Charlie Leclerc would be pretty happy with that.
It was interesting because when he switched to hards, man, that car came alive and he was super quick. If there was maybe another 10 laps, would have been interesting to see if he could have caught Max.
Well, we'll get a little bit more in depth in Ferrari a little bit later on the show, but let's talk about McLaren. Again, a great display from McLaren, looking super quick as always, but Oscar Piastri, I mean, it was quite a flawless weekend. Look, he's showing the temperament of a world champion, and what I liked about it was turn one, he didn't let up on Max. He stuck it in there, and he was not going to back off.
He obviously knew that was his only opportunity to win that race, because if Max got out in front, I don't think anyone would have beaten Max. Yeah, agree 100%. He's definitely got the temperament. Look at the other side of the garage. For me, it's typical Lando Norris, man. He's just, I don't know whether the pressure gets to him or he's just pushing too hard, which I'd probably say that might be the case because he knows he's under threat from his teammate, and then you've got Max nipping at his heels as well. Yeah, Lando definitely needs to clean up Saturdays if he wants to have a shot at being a title contender.
Yeah, I mean, he had a strong race. So, I mean, you got that going for him. That should give him a little bit of confidence going into Miami, which is a track where I think he had his first win in Formula One last year. Yeah, he just definitely needs to clean up that Saturday because we know how important it is to have a good qualifying session and championship so tight. You got to outperform your teammate. But what did you think about that turn one penalty for Max Verstappen?
Yeah, I don't have an issue with it. Again, it's subjective. You look at Red Bull's side and you could say, well, Max was ahead, but then McLaren go, well, we were ahead. Then you look at the two different onboards. Oscar's, you could tell he was ahead. Then you look at Max's onboard, and you can't see Oscar, so you would go, he's ahead. But I don't have an issue with the time penalty. Martin Brundle said the penalty didn't really have an effect. It would have been better if they told him to give the place back, because then Max would have been running in dirty air as opposed to being out front in the clean air and trying to build that gap. Being out in clean air is gold. He could push as hard as he needed to try and make sure he had that 5-second gap where he could slip back into second place. Yes, he got the 5-second penalty, but he didn't really lose out too much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too many qualms about the time penalty, but yeah, I get what Martin was saying there about how you enforce it, whether it's a switch back or, the 5 seconds and just having that clean air. I think in the end, things worked out the right way. Yeah, I mean, I look at the footage and I just think to myself that Max was never really going to make the corner.
Yeah, no, he was definitely not going to make the corner.
He was not going to make the corner. And like I said, what I mentioned before was I like that Piastri just kept his foot in it. In the end, everything played out the way it should have. But Max was obviously quite livid.
Of course, he's going to be upset about it, because he lost out. So, and again, subjective points of view. But I think overall, Red Bull should be pretty happy. I mean, Max pulls it out of the bag in qualifying and gave himself an opportunity to win that race. They've definitely found some pace. Would have been actually interesting to see how Yuki would have gone in the race. Unfortunately, he had the DNF with Pierre Gasly. Again, 50-50. I mean, they put it down to a racing incident. Yuki probably could have given him a bit more room. You can't give an inch because the track is so hard to overtake, so you can't really afford to give your opposition a leg up.
Yeah, it's a tough one for Yuki because a mixed weekend in a way. Okay, he got to Q3, which is exactly what Red Bull wants him to do. But when you look at the pace discrepancy on Max, it was about 0.9 of a second. Not great. Obviously, he had the accident in practice, which is not ideal. And then a DNF on lap 1 of the race, which was, my opinion, more of a racing incident, but I think he probably could have given a little bit more room. Gasly definitely sort of outbraked him on the outside. And I mean, Gasly, he turns left and he's still on the outside of that corner, but I think there was plenty of room on the left for Yuki to go. But again, it's a lap 1 incident. I don't think there's anyone massively at fault. I think the pressure mounts a little bit on Yuki because, again, he's there to score points, as we know, and it hasn't happened again.
Bit of you would say, a scruffy weekend overall, so he definitely needs to tidy that up.
Yeah, well, they've got him in a testing program, I think, next week. One of those tyre test programs in one of the older Red Bull cars, which is good because it gives them a little bit more running time and obviously more time in the seat, even though it is an older spec car. There'll be things that they can work on with him, which is definitely, not a bad thing. But yeah, the jury's still out on Yuki. It's been a bit mixed and pressure will build if he doesn't get a good result in Miami in a couple of weeks' time. Now, moving on to, let's go on to Mercedes. George Russell, again, consistent points. Kimi, not a bad little finish there for Kimi as well.
It was pretty quiet, really, for Mercedes. Russell said in his post-race interview that he was just struggling with the tyre temps. They were just overheating. He was struggling to bring them back down the temperature and then being in traffic. He couldn't get a handle on the tyres overheating. Kimi was saying struggling more with the fronts. On the first stint, he said the fronts went away pretty quick. So then on the second stint, he sort of tried to bring them in a little bit easier and he said they still went away. He felt the pace was there towards the end of the race. We're probably expecting them to be a little bit quicker than what they were, but I mean, overall, it was a pretty quiet weekend for them.
Yeah, so that was George Russell in P5 and Kimi in P6. I think they'll be relatively happy, sort of a mistake-free weekend and picking up a bag of points. I'm sure George would have loved to keep a little bit of the streak going with another podium finish, as he's been very consistent this year. Now, Ferrari, another team in the headlines for more the wrong reasons. We've got Lewis struggling a fair bit, and sort of in the same vein of Lando, sort of coming out with just a lot of sort of negative comments about himself and where he's at with the car. Charles on the other side of the garage, picking up the P3, picking up some good points. Yeah, tough one for Ferrari here.
Charles maximised his weekend. That was a pretty solid drive for me. That was probably the drive of the day. At times, he was the fastest car on the track. Yeah, Lewis is a funny one. He's clearly still not finding the balance that he needs. He started to come good towards the end of the race, but again, by then it's too late. And he was saying in that first stint, he was just sliding around everywhere. And you could actually see, I think it was when Max came out of the pits and he was behind Lewis and on board with Max, and you could just see Lewis was just sliding around everywhere, just struggled with understeer in the first stint. He said, no matter what I did, I couldn't get it to turn or do what I wanted it to do. Yeah, again, it seems like that hard tyre seems to suit the Ferrari a little bit better.
Yeah, a little bit of a struggle there, again, for Lewis. P7, obviously not where he really wants to be fighting. Wants to be up more closer to those podium positions, of course.
They still got plenty of work to do.
Yeah, a lot of work to do at Ferrari. I mean, they've bought a few upgrades over the last couple of weeks, and maybe there's been sort of incremental gains, but definitely not enough at this stage. But let's see. I mean, when we did the preview show for the 2025 season, we talked about Lewis needing around 5 races to sort of get to grips with the new system, engine mode, just all the different intricacies of the Ferrari over the Mercedes. How much time do you think the public, we talked about this, how much time will the public give him, particularly the Tifosi? How patient are they going to be with him, considering the amount of money, obviously, they've paid him to come across to Ferrari, 7-time world champion? There's got to be that sort of tipping point.
I mean, he's just not coming to grips with that car right now, and you would probably have to say that the pressure will start to mount soon, but he just seems lost at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there comes a time where you look at any sport in the world, doesn't matter what it is, and you have like these generational talents that do extremely well, have really successful careers. There always will come a point where they'll start to self-doubt themselves.
Yeah, and I think also too if you watch Carlos, if Carlos starts to get a handle on that car as well, which he's starting to show, then it makes Lewis's look even worse, you know what I mean?
That's a really good point. Because the comparisons will always be there.
Yeah.
Because they're obviously the drivers that have
been
swapped.
Lewis has just somehow got to fix Saturday. That's been his downfall. He seems to have lost that little bit on the Saturday, and that really hurts him on the Sunday. His racing is still there. The racecraft and even the speed on Sunday is still there. But
Yeah.
he's just lacking that little bit on the Saturday. And I think he needs to start to get comfortable with that car, like you said. Otherwise, the pressure is going to start to mount.
I'm getting worried. Like, I am getting a little worried for him just because, there's going to be a point where there's just going to be so much pressure on him. You can't discount the guy. Like, he's one of the best ever to do it. But I just wonder if does he still have it in him? Like, I mean, the honeymoon period's over. That's 100% for sure. I mean, a few months ago, he looked to be in a great place, super motivated because, we saw how he was the last season at Mercedes, a little bit down and out. Yeah, it doesn't take long, does it, in a pressure cooker?
And especially in a high-pressure environment like Ferrari where they demand success. He's probably been a little bit lucky because Charles has sort of struggled as well. Once Charles starts, like this weekend, he starts to show he can extract everything from the car, then the expectation is Lewis to do the same.
Yeah, and we are forgetting that Lewis had a sprint win in China. So, I mean, it just seems to be, from the outside, it just seems to be that he's just not quite getting the balance of the car and just, that obviously affects your confidence and you only have to be a little bit off to be in the position that he's in. So, well, let's see. He's got a couple of week break now. Realistically, the results need to come relatively quick in relation to his teammate with Leclerc, because if Leclerc gets a handle on this car and starts outperforming him consistently, it's not looking too good. Actually, I think there'll be a lot of pressure on Vasseur. Because when you think about it, it's like Vasseur is always going to be tied to this decision of letting Carlos go and bringing in Lewis. Yeah, for Vasseur's sake. He wants to see his man kick it up a notch.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of Carlos, let's go on to Williams. Double points finish there. I think they'll be relatively happy with that. Carlos looking the goods, having a good weekend in comparison to Albon, and it seems to be that he's getting the handle of the car, which is good to see. And he was essentially dragging Albon around there for those final 10 laps to hold that P8 and P9 position for Williams from a charging Hadjar in 10th.
That's what we expect from Williams. They're clearly the best of the rest. There was probably more pace there, but like you said, because of Hadjar trying to make a move on Albon, they kind of probably couldn't show their true pace. Mate, solid job for Sainz. He looks like he's starting to come to grips with that car. If he can get a bit of luck on his side, I think we'll start to see a lot more of those. And then Albon, again, another solid drive. He's just super consistent at the moment.
Still getting feisty on the radio.
Yeah.
Old Albono. Yeah, I mean, that's a great dynamic to look at over the course of the season. Otherwise, I think Williams would be pretty happy with a P8, P9, getting a few points on the board, sort of cementing, like you said, the best of the rest. Going on to P10, Isaac Hadjar with the Racing Bulls and his teammate Liam Lawson finishing just behind in 11th, but being demoted with a 10-second penalty, which in my mind was probably one of the most ridiculous 10-second penalties I've seen in a while.
Yeah, I mean, man, that was rough. We managed to see some footage again this morning before we sat down, and we were both like, what the hell? Like, Lawson was miles up the road before he turned into the corner. Okay, he overshot it a little bit, but why he got the penalty, I do not know. Like, that was insane.
Yeah, when I was watching the footage, and I saw him cross the line in 11th and then saw him got demoted, I actually didn't know they had the 10-second penalty, and I was trying to figure out what it was for. So as I was looking on the internet, trying to find out a bit of information about it, some of the text was essentially, he got a 10-second penalty because he did essentially what Max Verstappen did at turn 1. So I was expecting, okay, him and Doohan must have been really close at turn 1. But yeah, after seeing the footage, I mean, he made the pass on Doohan under DRS. He was basically down the road. Like you said, overshot slightly, came back on, maybe compromised Doohan a little bit, but I still believe like he had the run anyway.
Man, he was like 5 car lengths ahead by the time he went to turn 1. It was hectic.
I mean, I'm sort of happy in a way that he wasn't P10 and then that compromised him picking up a point. Coming in P11, okay, you're not getting any points, demoted to P12. Not a big deal in the end, but yeah, I think the consistency on some of these penalties, or just the way some of these penalties have been handed out, have been a little bit ridiculous.
If it was the same as Oscar and Max, and you got a 10-second penalty, you go, okay, because that is the standard penalty for that sort of thing. The only reason Max got the 5-second penalty was because it was on the opening lap, so the stewards look at that as a mitigating circumstance, so they're a little bit more lenient.
Which makes sense to me.
Yeah.
On lap 1.
When you're 5 car lengths up the road, okay, even if you miss the corner, I don't even think Doohan would have been able to get past him.
Well, I reckon even if you spoke to Doohan after the race, he would have been like, there's no way I would have got past him anyway. Yeah, I think it was a bit of a ridiculous one. Hadjar doing well though, P10, picking up a point. So good job to Hadjar. He's definitely shown his wares. He went on a alternative strategy. It was one of the hard tyre starters, went long and then switched to the mediums later on the race, and it seemed to be not a bad strategy. It's the same strategy that Lando Norris was on. So yeah, good point there for Isaac Hadjar. Liam Lawson, from his point of view, I think it was a pretty good weekend. Him and Hadjar were relatively close through most of the sessions. He outqualified him. Just got a pretty poor start. He dropped down a few places. I think he sort of got a little bit tied up with the Yuki Gasly incident, and it sort of compromised him a little bit. But I think he'll be pretty happy. He's tracking, look, I think for Liam, he's tracking in the right direction. Bahrain was a step forward, and I think this was just another big step forward for him. So I think that leads well into Miami. Now, in P13 and 14, we have Haas, which will be very disappointed after the double points finish last week in Bahrain. Ollie Behrman taking P13, so outperforming Ocon again. What do you make of Haas's weekend? Bit of a stinker.
Yeah, it's just that inconsistency, right? That's hurting them at the moment. So they're very track specific. They'd be pretty unhappy about that. On the flip side, Ollie's got the upper hand on his teammate. Again, he's making Ocon look pretty ordinary. Ocon shocking qualifying. We would expect Ocon to be consistently ahead of his teammate, but that's not the case. And Behrman's just doing the job.
Yeah, granted Ocon though, they really did muff his strategy. He was one of 3 cars that came in on that lap 1 incident, went from the mediums to the hards. So that was Doohan, Ocon, and Bortoleto. They started on the mediums, and under safety car, they came in and made the change for the hards, which was, in hindsight, just a horrible, horrible decision.
Yeah, it's a big ask. It was like 48 or 49 laps on that hard tyre.
Yeah.
You could see all 3 of them just got munted at the end.
It didn't work out for any of those 3 drivers. They all struggled there massively in the end. But yeah, Haas, they really ebb and flow, don't they? They're like a pendulum. They have a great weekend, and then an absolute stinker. Then they might have another stinker, then another great weekend. So yeah, a little bit of work to do over there for Haas. Outside the points by a long way.
Yeah, I think they're just searching for consistency.
Aston Martin, Lance Stroll and old Fernando. Look, it's been made pretty clear in the media recently that all focus is on for 2026. We're probably not going to see much progression from Aston Martin throughout the season. Perhaps, there may be a few tracks that suit their car. But I think it's going to be a long one for Stroll and Alonso.
Yeah, they just struggled. Well, in this race, they just struggled straight line speed. So there was not much they could do, even with the strategy. Alonso probably got the most he could out of the car.
Yeah, I mean, it was a respectable P11, but still pointless for the season.
Yeah, to be honest, I think that's probably going to be the case for them the whole season. So 11th probably isn't that bad. I don't think that they improve much. Like you said, they might jag a point maybe here and there, but I think it's going to be pretty hard for them to score any points this year, especially when you've got Haas and Williams, and then Alpine are probably even a little bit better.
Racing Bulls as well.
Yeah, Racing Bulls as well. Pretty disappointing. I guess really the only highlight was Alonso nearly got killed by Bortolotto.
Well, yeah.
Into turn 1.
The manager almost got bonked going into turn 1 by his little protege. And, good old Oscar Piastri in the cool-down room, seeing that footage and making the comment that wonder if Gabby can get on a flight out of Saudi tonight. I mean, it's probably not a good thing, almost taking your manager out. Look, I think Bortoleto just didn't see Alonso coming. He was just sort of getting out of the way for, I think it was Lawson made the pass under DRS first, and then he came back across to the right-hand side to probably open up. Yeah, well, be in a bit better position for turn 1, and then Alonso just flew past.
Well, Alonso had the
DRS as well,
double DRS.
Yeah,
he had a double slipstream, so he was just carrying mega pace. And then, like you said, Bortoleto's just not seen him, and that would have been hectic.
Mate, it would have been interesting.
It would have been great.
Big talking point.
Would have been nasty.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it could have been a nasty accident too, particularly if they sort of clip wheels. And yeah, Bortoleto, Hulkenberg. Struggles continue. Look, Hulkenberg and Bortoleto both a lap down. Not much to really say there.
Well, you would imagine they'd be in a similar situation to Aston Martin.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's all looking ahead 2026.
2026.
I mean, the other little interesting point, I guess, with Aston Martin is just the speculation around the possible Saudi investment And obviously the rumours of Max Verstappen possibly joining the team. Yeah, I mean, all speculation at the moment. 2026, if you're a Aston or a Kick Sauber fan, I think it's just purely go to sleep, don't watch the rest of the season, and hopefully March next year, you can get excited about something. Now, Alpine, again, disappointing weekend for Alpine after, a promising start. I think if I remember correctly, Gasly, was he fastest in P1?
Yeah.
Looking pretty strong throughout most of the session, and Doohan was doing a good job as well. Qualifying, not so great. As we discussed earlier, Gasly tangled up in that lap 1 accident with one of his best mates on the grid, actually, with Yuki. Yeah, Doohan just, again, that was strategy just let him down. He was one of the cars that got pulled in lap 1 straight onto the hards, and he was just never really in it from that point of time. So, yeah, Flavio, not a happy chappy over there.
Yeah, like I said, doing shit strategy. 48 laps on that hard tyre. Just at the end, he got munted. He had nothing left. Gasly, strong in qualifying. So there's clearly pace in there. They just got to unlock it, try and find some more consistency. And again, Doohan and Gasly are fairly close. There's not like there's a massive gap between them. I don't know, they've just got to find that speed because you can't afford to be leaking points with that midfield battle being so close.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely points on the table there, well, particularly Gasly. But again, if that lap 1 incident never happened, Doohan probably would have had a far stronger race as well because they would have never put him in that situation with the that hard tyre to go 48 or 49 laps or whatever it was. So yeah, disappointing there for Alpine. Speaking of Flavio, I love the little bit with Martin Brundle on the pit walk and had a little chat to Flavio and introduced himself. Hi Flavio, I'm Martin Brundle. You fired me once, which I thought was quite funny. So after the conclusion of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, driver of the day in your mind, I think you picked Charles Leclerc, wasn't it?
Picked La Baguette. Charlie Leclerc.
Charlie Leclerc.
Yeah, I just thought it was a solid drive.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a great drive to get that Ferrari on the podium. Had a pretty good weekend. So I do not disagree with you on that one. What about the driver that's going to be under the most pressure? That's seething for the next 2 weeks.
I mean, there's a couple, but for me, Lando, the pressure's on. The pressure's on to see how he bounces back. We keep saying it, you can't make mistakes. With the championship being so tight, be interesting just to see his mindset and how he can bounce back.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I think Yuki, I think it's a bit tough for Yuki because I think he'll be really disappointed with how the weekend panned out, and then just to sort of sit around now for the next 2 weeks before the next one to try and prove yourself. That'll be a bit tough for him. I think out of the other rookies, Hadja's looking good, Behrman, Kimi, all looking good. I think Liam will be pretty happy going into the break with a couple of step-up performances over the last 2 weeks. 5 races have just done and dusted like that. It goes pretty quick. Basically a quarter of the season almost done. But yeah, from a fan's perspective, we've just got a couple of weeks downtime of no doubt a lot of speculation and good old clickbait headlines before we hit sunny Florida and pick up from where we left off last week.
I'm sure between now and then, the news will be coming in thick and fast. Plenty of rumours, plenty to discuss. So, I'll be looking forward to getting our teeth into that. And then we'll turn our focus on to Miami.
Sure will. Looking forward to it.
So until then, we'll catch you in the next one.
See ya.